Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to see. I see we have about 86 people on right now, and I just want to welcome you to our board briefing this afternoon. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. One, you'll see down at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A. We just ask that any questions that you might have, if you just type them into there, and that way, as we moderate the questions, we can do our best to try and answer your questions. But before we start, let's just start with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to serve you here at Andrews University. Lord, we know that these are tough times, not just for our university, but for our country. And we just ask that you continue to give us guidance and help us in making the appropriate decisions to continue your ministry here at this university. As we talk this afternoon, just ask that you lead the conversation in your holy name. Amen. So without further ado, Dr. Luxton, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am going to do what I normally do, and this time it's more comfortable. I'm sitting in a chair rather than standing by myself in a hall. And I'm going to go through the main agenda that happened on Monday morning. As you know, we have a lot of subcommittees that meet on, and this time it was Friday afternoon, we had the governance committee. And on Sunday, we had our audit committee, our finance and operations committee, our academic committee, and our spiritual and campus life committee. And they all feed back into the main presentation. And so rather than kind of go through those, I'm just going to go through the Monday board and talk my way through some of the reports that came through at the same time. On Monday, we started with a devotional by Ryan Hayes. He did an outstanding job of making chemistry both accessible to the board members as well as inspirational. So they were very pleased with Ryan's presentation, and it was very encouraging to them. And we followed that by, and this was not what we usually do, but we had a special feature, and Ron Knott and Scotty Baker zoomed in from the parlor of Sutherland House and introduced to the board members the two newest releases from the press, one which is the Old Testament commentary, Andrew's Study Bible commentary, that looks like it's a companion volume to the Bible commentary, and it is. And they talked about how we had offered, or we had reached out to conferences and suggested they bought those for their pastors, and about 50% of the conferences have responded positively so far. So that was great. And they also talked about the Daniel and Revelation journal that they have created, which has the on one side you've got the biblical text, and on the other side you have a space for notes, and at the bottom you have the Bible commentary, the Andrews Bible commentary notes. And we sent a set of those, two sets of those, in fact, to each board member prior to the board meeting, and we talked a little bit about that. So that was a nice kind of special feature for the board. We then go to what we call the consent items, and those are really, we don't discuss, we just vote them as a block. And this time we had our minutes, of course, from our last board meeting. We had any new appointments. Most of those were change in positions, couple of new appointments, but mainly change in positions and some retirements. And the third thing that we always do in the October board meeting is we give an annual diversity report. That diversity report is published. It will be on our website as well. And it really looks at the breakdown of our students, undergraduate, graduate, and together, our faculty, our staff, and looks at gender, and it looks at race in particular. And this was slightly unusual because we'd had such a drop in our employee base between last September and this September, and also our students, so it threw things out a little bit. But with percentages, the most notable change was the significant increase in Hispanic students of 2.4% from last year. And that is a trend that's been a rising trend over a number of years and continues to rise. And some increase, not as large as, but some increase also when we come to employees that are Hispanic too. So that is probably the largest shift that we are seeing in our diversity report. My report, I did two things. First of all, I gave an update on what is happening with COVID-19, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. And the second half of what I talked about was a look at our 5-year strategic plan, was 2017 to 22. We are halfway in the middle of it, and we've been focusing so much in the last year on just managing what we've been doing that in some ways we haven't talked about it as much perhaps as we have done in the past. But nevertheless, we went through each of our storylines and talked about what we were doing, particularly in our current environment, to continue to move towards those strategies. The first one relates to our campus culture, both faith development and wellness and diversity and inclusion, and talk a little bit about those and how those interrelate, and we've been working with that. The second one talks about how we reach out beyond ourselves to our local community, our national church and international church, and on that front, we've been doing some amazing things. There's a series from the leadership department in leadership in a time of crisis. We have our Center for Trauma Education, and they've been doing an amazing job as well. Plus, we've still been continuing to reach out in the local community in a range of ways. So I showed them our Change Hub that we have on our website and so on. So that was our that was that criteria. Our third and fourth relate to our academics and being a leader in teaching and learning, and also being a place of choice. And I was able to share some examples of our students prior to COVID attending and presenting at conferences, some of the research they're engaged in, and the tours like in archaeology that enrich and really give Andrews University its edge when it comes to our academic areas. And the last of the five relates to our campus, its infrastructure, and of course our wellness center was part of this strategic plan. And also I talked about the architecture edition, which is up, and a little bit about that. So that was it. So really just wanted the board to know where we are going on that. All of this, this is also important because in April we have our Higher Learning Commission visiting the campus, and they will be looking critically at our strategic plan and how we've been implementing it, both prior to this current year and also during this current year. So that was part of that. Going back to the report I gave related to COVID, in June, we had spent a lot of time going through all our changes, both how it impacts us financially and also operations. So in my report, I focused on operations, and I showed them charts of our figures and how we were doing related to our cases and our case management. And I'm sure I don't need to repeat all of that, as I'm sure you can kind of get straight on our website and see our updated cases. But the points I was able to make were these. First of all, if you look at up to last Friday, we really were doing very well. After our first 8 student cases way back in the beginning of August, we've been having occasional cases of students, 1 or 2 of employees, but really the numbers were staying very low, and we had no evidence of any transmission on the campus. So that was really good. As I'm sure many of you know, we did have one department on campus where over the weekend we became aware of a number of positive cases related to transmission in that area. And that is the risk, of course, of something like this. Things can escalate very, very quickly. And so with that one incident, we ended up with 22 individuals either in isolation or quarantine just from that particular case, which really jumped up our overall numbers and statistics a lot. However, I also want to put that in the context of our current environment, because irrespective of that situation, today alone, I believe I'm right, there were 10 new quarantines on the campus from individuals who had had close contact with somebody else. Nearly all of those individuals who were off campus. And that has been our pattern since August. We have really, other than this one situation, we've done really, really well on the campus. But as the cases are dramatically rising in the community, which they are right now, the most active cases now in Berrien County than there have been since the beginning of COVID. Over 300, about 350 plus, I think, right now, active cases. And that is impacting us. And it's impacting our staff, faculty, and particularly our students that are living in the community and graduate students. And that's why the majority of our cases have been in those categories. Not interestingly, what other campuses have been reporting, which tends to be their undergraduates. Our students on the whole have done really, really well. Our classroom environments have managed situations very well. Residence halls on campus also. So I'm going a little bit off my report now, just to speak to us as a community, particularly right now, and for the next few weeks, while we see this rapid increase in cases in Michigan that's being mirrored here in the county. We just need to be really, really careful. We need to go back to the plans that we put in place before we reopened again in August. Every department had a plan how they were going to manage and mitigate risk. We need to follow those. All of us need to be using Campus Clear. That has been amazing in us managing to respond quickly to situations, really, really critical. And masks, please, masks. There is really no reason why on a campus we cannot follow our protocols and keep things down. We can't stop what's happening off the campus. We can manage our own lives to some degree, obviously, but we can't. We aren't living in a bubble. We can't live in a bubble, but we really do need to do all we can to hold things back, hold things down for the rest of this. Before we have just over 4 weeks now, 4 weeks and a day, I think it is, until we break for the semester. All right. After my report, we went to the Provost report, and Dr. Arthur went through a comparison, looking at various ways of looking at statistics with faculty, with ratios, with overhead costs, and so on. That was very helpful. He showed how, with the changes that we have made in the last 6 months, and had to make, of course, because of COVID, the good part of that is that our ratios have not got worse. In fact, to some degree, they have slightly improved. And that has meant that we have not made the huge losses that might have happened if we had not been able to make adjustments. So he was able to go through that. He also looked at some of the other changes and the directions and initiatives that were happening in the various colleges. And his report ended with the normal statistics that we give every year to show how we are doing, how we're doing with enrollment, how we're doing with retention, with our graduation rates, our commitment to service and the church, and so on. and also how we do in our external exams, professional exams that our students take. And really, that is a mirror of pretty much most years. We really do well. Our commitment to service over each year and the last few years we've reported has increased. Retention was interesting because our goal is 85% of freshmen, and you'd think that maybe it would drop this year, but it did not. It was dead on the 85%. Slightly higher last year, but pretty strong under our current environment, which was also really good to see. Students that were here stayed here. Even if some of them are studying remotely, they are still with us. So that was a very positive report from the provost. Our board education this time, we invited a Dynamic Campus who are now managing our IT services to present to the board, and they introduced themselves, and the interim CIO also talked about some of the priorities and some of the things they are discussing with the IT team and some of the expectations that the university and board can have of them in the next 2 year time frame. And that was a very helpful report for the board, well received, and I think has set a direction for future reports on progress. After all of those, we kind of went to our action items, and first of those in this time of year is always the audit report, and we are always looking to see whether we keep our record of a clean audit, which we did yet again. The comments from the auditors about the management, our financial management, and are consistently excellent, and they were excellent again. And huge kudos to the financial management team and those that make sure that really what is in our books is accurate and we can trust what we are hearing. That's really what the audit said. There's also an audit from the General Conference that looks at our compliance to policy, and there were no substantial items in that either. So a very good audit report. Then we move to our financial statement. How are we doing up to September of this year? That's the only document I've actually pulled up in front of me, so I can be as close to accurate as possible here. And I think the bottom line is, at this point in most areas, we are actually doing very well. Our tuition, which we have struggled with a little bit over the last few years, our net tuition revenue is on track. And that is good. It shows that we were pretty accurate in our assessment of what would be taught with our credits. We are a little bit down in fees because of things like the air park and where flights could not go. We couldn't fly so much, or have other groups in flying over the summer. But net tuition looks good. Our regular revenue has been boosted as well. We got some special money gifts, appropriations, totaling about $1.1 million to help us with our COVID expenses. All of that money came into this period, as did some money coming from the federal government, that some went into last year's figures and some came into this year's figures. As you know, 50% of that went to students, 50% came to us. So and 400,000 of what came to us, of 600,000+, is in this year's budget. So that, of course, boosts our other revenues considerably. And so that kind of is nice. And then our expenses were also under budget. So before you go to our auxiliaries, that is housing and food and that type of thing, we are about $1.9 million above budget, which is wonderful. The auxiliaries, of course, have taken a huge hit because although we have started and are face-to-face, a number of our students decided to still continue to study remotely, or perhaps if they were of the right age, live in the community rather than live in residence halls. Ironically, when it comes to safety, it seems our residence halls may be doing better than those who are in the community. However, that has impacted us considerably, and in that area, we are under budget by quite a bit, which means that our $1.9 million kind of moves back to $1.2 million gain by the end of September. In other words, we're better than budget by $1.2 million. Compensation was on track, just a little bit under. Benefits were quite a bit under, including medical being quite a bit under, which is also not the usual pattern. So that also has been very good. Having said that, we did boost our medical quite a lot in the last couple of years. So that has helped with that too. So at the end of September, things are looking good. Of course, we recognize that our losses that are happening in our residence halls and our university apartments and food are likely to continue for the rest of the year. And so what is a nice figure right now is going to whittle away. Also, we are going to have continued expenses related to COVID, related to testing, related to some of the other things that we have had to purchase, or individuals that we are using particularly to help with us with our tracing and management of things. So those costs, additional costs, will continue over the year, and we will see more drops probably from housing. So it is a comparatively good picture at this point. The board was very pleased with where we were because there was being so much uncertainty, but we still do have some expenses, and still January is a little bit of an unknown to us. All right, after that, we went into our budget assumptions, and of course that means what are we going to do as we look towards next year? How are we going to set our fees? What are we going to do with everything else? And it is, right now we are making some assumptions, but we are aware of the fact that we may need to review those in February, March time as it becomes clear what's going to happen in January. But right now, just to give you an idea of some of those assumptions, we are not going to assume a bump back of our enrollment in this first year. So we are budgeting, as is the normal practice, a little bit lower than this year. So we're budgeting at 99% of this year. Why are we doing that? Because the students that came in are lower entering groups, which that's where some of our losses may well continue through all of those years of education for those students. So we are not sure that we are going to do an immediate regaining of our numbers. It could take us a number of years. So we need to budget cautiously on our numbers. So we're budgeting on 99%. And also recognizing while some of our housing might bump back, it probably again will not go back to how it was before. So both of those issues will be hits against the way we budget for next year. We will have a fee increase of 2.5%. By the way, this is a kind of sideline, but it was interesting when we looked in our finance committee and we compared our net tuition of undergraduates compared with our other sister schools. People out there suggest we are high. We actually, our net amount, in other words, the amount that the average student pays, undergraduate student pays, was actually lower than just about all of our other sister schools. So, that is an interesting thing that we need to be able to publicize and put out there a little bit. Okay, that was a bit off the topic. So that was the fee increase. We're looking at right now a minimum, but right now an employee increase of 1%. All of the other items are minor. So when you put all that in, we have a small amount to decide how we can find. There's still a gap between our new assumptions and making sure that everything meets. We still need to get a gain of our $2.5 million. that is to continue to push back some of our negative balances from multiple years, and many, many years ago for that matter. And also put enough money in to building up our capital base as well, working capital. So that's kind of where we are with our budget assumptions, and they will need to be reviewed again as we put our budget together November, December, and as we see what adjustments we need to make. We also need to recognize that when you look at this year's budget and you shift it into next year, there are already going to be a number of dramatic changes. And so that will become clearer through our budget process as well. But we have a beginning of where we're going. So that's good. All right, we then had a President's Council report, and that was really very quick. That was Dave Feiner gave that, and he really spent his time thanking the board members. As I think many of you know, between May and September, we raised just about $1 million for student scholarships, which was huge. And many of the board members were part of making that happen. And he indicated that they would be hearing from him again as we seek to try and see if we can get another few $100,000 at least to support students going into spring, because we know that some of them are still going to be struggling, and we want to be as responsive to that as we can. Our governance report came next, and that really focused on our trustees. Over the last few years, we have lost a number of trustees to illness. Unfortunately, a couple died, and we have been holding those open, thinking we would make the replacements at our normal constituency, which should have been next March. But because of GC shifting their dates, we've shifted our dates, and our constituency is now March 22. And we felt it was too long to leave what is now 5 vacancies open. The 5th vacancy is from the resignation of one of our long-standing board members who feels they need to do more with some family obligations and also work, and that's Sandra Johnson, who works for Advent Health. So we reluctantly accepted her resignation. And then we went and we had 5 names that came from the governance committee. And I'm going to give you 3 of those names because they're the ones that I've been able to contact and had affirmation from so far. I'm still chasing the other 2 to get them, and hopefully they will be positive as well. So the 3 names of the 3 new trustees, one is Charles Bracken. He's a businessman from the Detroit area. He told me he's moving towards retirement, so he'll have much more time to help us at that time. So we're looking forward to that. The second is Juanita Campbell. She is a doctor from the Kalamazoo area, and she and her husband are both great supporters of the university. He works for Stryker Engineering, and we are pleased that she has accepted. The third one is Adam Rose. He is a lawyer out in Portland, and he is also, all 3 of these are attended or are alums, and he is probably the youngest of the group, maybe close to Juanita. We're trying to build up some of the younger members on the team. He's very actively involved on a number of boards and also the church out in Portland. So those are 3 new individuals that we have joining the board, and we feel they will bring a lot of great new expertise for us. Following the governance report, and I just have 2 or 3 more items, so we're getting towards the end here. We have the student experience and faith development report, and we didn't take actions there, but the chair of that committee, Ernie Medina, went through and talked a lot about his excitement with the reports he was hearing from the different areas of campus, from faith development, from diversity and inclusion, and also talked about the report given by Ben Panigo regarding what they are doing to manage COVID. And just a report of saying how thankful he is for the amazing leadership in the campus life areas of what happens. The final report of which we took actions directly related to Andrews was the academic programs and education services report. And there they took 2 or 3 actions that I'll share with you. One was to vote new institutional outcomes. These have been worked on for some time by the faculty and with some consultation with the university chaplain and others beyond the academic area. And these will be in our calendar for our bulletin for next year, and have undergraduate and graduate very, very well thought out and integrated together. And if you haven't seen them, I think you'll appreciate the work that's been done on that. They approved 2 new programs, the Doctor of Science in Occupational Therapy and an Associate in Architectural Studies. So both of those, they agreed would be great additions and potentially bring new students to the campus. They also voted 2 changes in names of departments, both in the seminary. The Christian Ministry Department will now be the Department of Practical and Applied Theology, and the Discipleship and Religious Education Department will now be the Department of Discipleship and Lifespan Education. So those were all voted as recommended by our academic community. The end of the meeting was the usual annual meetings, corporation meetings of some of our subsidiaries. And those are the Andrews Broadcasting Corporation, the Center for Youth Evangelism, and the University Retirement Center. And all of those, we voted a few revisions to their bylaws, which basically were name changes, and also the officers of each of those groups and their boards. So, and that was it. And we closed our board meeting. I would say that once again, the board members were extremely positive, thoughtful in their comments. They engaged with us on our critical issues, but made very clear that they are really very supportive of the university and of what you do to make everything work on this campus and enable us to fulfill our mission. So please know that you are definitely appreciated, and they make that clear every time they, I was going to say come to the campus, but every time they connect with us on the campus. So thank you very much. All right, I think that's it from me. There's a few other people who have panelist rights here, and if any of you think I have missed anything, please feel free to jump in and add it. Other than that, I'm open to any questions that you have put out there, and I think that Stephen and maybe Kriston are going to ask me the questions, and I may feel free to pass it on to one of my colleagues if I think they can answer it better.
Dr. Luxton, a few of the questions that came through, and there have been some initial answers given, but there was a question specifically about how our employee base has changed this year. That was one.
Okay, and Darcy may be able to help me if I don't have the exact figures right. But in fact, if you look at over the last 3 years, our employee base has dropped a little bit each year. So with our 2 early retirement plans that we had 2 years ago and this year, there have been some adjustments there. With some reorganizations of departments, there have been some adjustments there. And then also with moving all of the Bon Appetit employees to Bon Appetit, half of them were employed by Andrews and half Bon Appetit, and also movement of IT employees to Dynamic Campus. That's another block of So that changes. That doesn't change the number of people on our campus, but that changes the direct relationship with Andrews. Of the number of people that we have changed, I think we have dropped. And some of this will not stay that way. Some of it is COVID related, but I believe we're probably around 10% lower in employees than we were. I think that's probably a kind of a round figure of about the amount of change that we've been experiencing.
Thank you. One other question was tied in. You were mentioning medical expenses being down, and we've talked about this a bit in the Q&A column, but someone was saying, it might be expected that they'd be down because of non-COVID medical appointments being reduced. And they just asked if we mentioned that and took that into consideration when we talked yesterday.
Yes, yeah, we talked about that with the board and the fact that is there. So as we look towards next year, so this year we put in, I think it was over the last 2 years, we put in close to $1 million extra in our medical benefits because we were consistently over budget. And so part of that means we have actually caught up on ourselves, and with some of the drop of our employee base, that also changes the amount. But as Darcy pointed out, the amount per head has also dropped. So I saw it's a range of issues, I think, that have made the adjustment. But we are aware that some individuals may have held off, with medical appointments and or elective surgery because of COVID, and that will bounce back, and we are accounting for that, I think.
There was one quick question about where you could get the Old Testament commentary or the Daniel and Revelation study journals. I will copy that link to the book, to the press in our chat column. And then
I'm sure they would be very happy to receive.
Yes, tell Ron not that I did this. There's also a question about how are COVID-related expenses connected with the government funds. Do those government funds cover all our increases in COVID expenses, or how does that?
So the government funds. So that we have about 1,200. About $1.2 million from the government. That was about it, and 600,000 of that went straight back to students. And Alinda Bedney and her team did an amazing job of really spearheading that along with student life to try and identify how to do that fairly and equitably. The other 600,000 came back to us, and it did not have to be used for COVID-related expenses. Okay, that basically was to deal with things such as a loss of revenue in the residence halls, or a loss of revenue with students going home, or any refunds. That's what that 600,000 went for. The money that we got from our organizations that support us, the $1.1 million, that was intended to be solely used for the additional expenses that we were facing due to COVID. And currently, the expenses amounts to about 900,000, and the amount we have is 1.1 million. So we have just about 200,000 plus left of that. But of course, we still have more expenses to come. So and that's just extra expense. That is not about losses. So federal money helped go against some of our losses, and the other gifts have gone against some of our additional expenses.
Okay. There was a question that just came in about, let me just read it out. Students are slow to register for spring semester. They appear to be waiting on a finalized plan. And when will all those details be announced?
Dr. Arthur?
I just responded in the a written response as well. So toward the end of this week, we'll have all of those finalized. As you know, we invited some faculty to join that planning group to help us figure out some of those details. There's a meeting yet planned for this week And towards the end of this week, those should be aired out and shared with faculty and students.
And I think in brief, I think what we are, and I think we've kind of been indicating this, we will be starting at the normal time. The first week, there will not be face-to-face classes, but there will be, the classes will start. There will be testing for everybody. And it's not until those test results come back that we will move back to face-to-face. We won't have a spring break, but we will have a range of day breaks throughout the semester. And I say still some details to be worked out on how all that fits together. But that's kind of the plan. I think we had hoped that we would be further ahead as far as getting back to normality, but clearly that's not going to happen. And so, we are going to have to continue. What we've been doing very, very well. I just know that it's such a pressure on everybody. I realize for all of us, faculty and staff, I mean, the pressure everyone is under is just significant, and we realize that. But I think we have a lot of routines in place now that we can continue to build on until we can, ease things up a little bit.
Connected with what you both just were talking about, a sort of related question is someone's asked, how are we studying or understanding student mental health trends on our campus, and how can or would that inform our plans for spring semester?
So the Counseling Center has an assessment tool, and in the next week or so, we'll send that assessment, that tool to all students, maybe to the entire campus. As part of that assessment, it gives us a sense as to both the students' awareness, the campus awareness, knowledge of mental health challenges, how to identify, how to make reference, how to refer to the appropriate places, but also gives a sense as to the level of mental stress or mental health challenge that a student might be experiencing. Once that's sent out to the campus, and we hope to have a good response rate, so we have a sense of how things are going. Of course, we'll use that to inform the kinds of services we provide for the spring semester. Keep in mind that the 5 dates that the president just referenced, without the spring break, we'll have those 5 days interspersed throughout the semester, maybe one every 3 weeks. That's meant to give this mental break, this time for renewal throughout the course of the semester. Not just 1 week break, if we want to do that, but interspersed throughout the semester as a way to respond to the mental health needs of our students. But hopefully that survey, that assessment will also give us some rich information that we can use as well.
Thank you. One other question that's come in here, and a couple have upvoted this question as well. As we've been following the news, there's a lot of discussion about are cases increasing in the US or in the Midwest or in Michigan or even in our county. This question ties into that. It says, do we know what happens if cases in the area keep increasing? I'm assuming right here in Southwest Michigan. What's our plan if that is or becomes the case?
Yeah, I mean, we have been watching that really carefully, and we have a group that meets twice a week that keeps evaluating our plans and any adjustments we need to make to respond to things. I think it's hard to say that there is one trigger that said that it's too complicated for that. Some campuses, of course, but that is related to what is on their campus. Some campuses have closed down for a couple of weeks or moved to remote for a couple of weeks. Others, or you notice the latest one with University of Michigan, who's actually the health department, that basically said all undergraduate students had to stay at home other than go to classes, and that was coming from the health department. So, so far among our students, we have not seen the kind of rise that would cause us to feel like we'd have to do something like that. It's mainly graduate students that really have been impacted more than undergraduates right now. So I think we just have to watch really, really carefully. We do already have protocol in place for our employees. We have got many that have been working remotely part of the time and continue to do so. So we do need to make sure that we keep things as safe as possible. So as I say, as things trigger, as things change, we have to change with it. I think one of the strong messages that's out there, though, is if you are in session and you have students on your campus, the worst thing you can do is suddenly close down and send them all home with any problems that the campus might have. So that is not kind of what we are thinking at this point in time. I don't think we're in a situation to suggest that. In fact, right now, I'd say the campus is probably our safest place. I'm actually talking to some of the health professions in the area. That is kind of what they've said. They said if you do anything, you need to keep everyone who's on the campus, because that seems to be where things are in a more controlled environment than when you have everyone moving around in the community. I know that's not a satisfactory answer to the question, but because I wish we could say this happens, then we do this. But I don't think you can actually line it up quite that cleanly and clearly. It depends on what exactly the situations we're facing.
In the Q&A, for those of you who've been following it, there's a few questions that are coming up that get into even more specific details on the breaks that we talked about for next semester. One is just kind of a technical detail question. Will they be on the same day of selected weeks? But then the questions that have emerged from that really kind of get into the question of, will those really truly be a break for our students? Many of our students fear that they won't really get days off. They'll have homework on those days. They won't be protected on those days. And someone has seconded that comment as well, that those students feel from this semester that they've kind of been expected to study and do homework on those days off instead of really truly having a break. So a bunch of questions and supporting votes for those questions on that topic.
And I think that's a really important question for the faculty as a group to discuss, as well as the deans, to make sure that happens. It's really, really critical that the students do get some breaks. They need it as we all do. So, we need to be. This is the time to be gentle with each other. It really is. We need to be gentle with each other.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions that have been asked out loud, as it were, so far.
Well, I usually end by saying, you know what my email is, so always feel free to send me any other questions that you haven't put out here. You also know Kriston's email and Chip's email and Darcy's email and anyone else in administration, and you should feel free to continue to dialogue with us on any questions or concerns you have. Yes, Ewan.
One last one, I think. Well, it's maybe not the last one, but the last one that's been asked is, will the semester finish earlier as fall semester did?
Dr. Arthur, you need to come back again.
I have to come back for that one. I thought we were finished. Sorry about that. The short answer to that is no. We will begin classes as scheduled on the 11th of January. It'll be remote for that first week. But for the duration of the semester, will end as scheduled. So we will not end early like we have done for fall. And even for fall, keep in mind that the face-to-face expectations would end by November 24, but the semester still ends on December 10th. I think that's what the date is. So face-to-face ends by the 24th, but the semester ends as was scheduled. So keep that in mind.
And don't go away again, because I'm going to ask you if you'll close us out with prayer, Krista.
Let's pray. Our Father, we thank you. As we pause, we really do see your hands leading and guiding and supporting and strengthening us as a university. You strengthen our students. We have come this far, almost 9 weeks into the semester, and we know that it's been a bit of a challenge. It's taken a toll, but you strengthen them. You strengthen our faculty. Also, 9 weeks into the semester, it's been a challenge, been rough. They have to have students within the classroom right in front of them, but also remotely, and having those dual modes of delivery has been a challenge for our staff who do such great work to support the environment, support learning. We see your hand with us. We thank you. And while now we have difficult moments in the present realities, COVID-19, financial stresses, personal and corporate stresses among employees and students, we have this confidence that the God who was with us yesterday, and the God who is with us today, will be with us tomorrow. And it says, with this confidence that we have hope, that your mercies are new every morning, your compassion will never fail, your guiding hands will always be there to show us the way that we should go. We have this hope that because you are with us, our tomorrow will be bright, our tomorrow will be steady, our tomorrow will be firm and assured as we have had our todays and our yesterdays. Thank you for this promise. And thank you for this present in our lives. We submit to your will. May your will be done through us. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And we've got four weeks to Thanksgiving, pretty much, and so we're going to make it. We're going to make it just fine. So, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Everyone.